Hey everybody, Will Brink here, brinkzone.com. Going to try to briefly cover a very contentious topic, which of course are vaccines, COVID vaccines. So I'm going to try to keep this as neutral as I can, but I do have some thoughts that may be of value, some hypothesis and conjecture on my part to be sure, but as long as you're honest about that, what you're doing, that being, conjecture in science is perfectly okay as long as you're being honest that that's what you're doing. If you're not being honest about that's what you're doing, that's when you get yourself into trouble. Now, hypothesis is fine, and it obviously you usually start with hypothesis, conjecture, going to hypothesis, and working your way through, and that's how you end up with answers to things. Nothing wrong with that. I use the word hypothesis accurately. I will say that theory, you have to understand that in science, the word theory is not the same as it is used in typical English usage. It's different. So when people say I have a theory or so forth, or when on the other side people mistakenly say, well, it's just a theory, it means they really don't understand the term. So hypothesis is really the correct term to use what other people would say theory. So regarding the vaccines, I'm not going to get into the controversial topic about dangers or lack thereof. What I am going to talk about, though, is that no scientist, no researcher, no study, what have you, claims that there's zero risk, because there's no such thing as zero risk. So the debate with the vaccines are, of course, going to be, is there risk and how much risk? And the real question, of course, is always risk to benefit. The real issue is not that there's zero risk. The issue is, what is the risk of any vaccine or any drug or anything versus getting a disease? That's the question. But I'm not going to talk about that. What I am going to talk about, though, however, is that in those people that have issues with vaccines, that is anybody that, legit, there's a serious side effect. So my hypothesis is that the mechanism by which that happens is likely the same or very similar mechanism by how COVID creates, serious illness. Obviously, blood clots, damage to the heart, damage to lungs, and so forth. There's no reason to think that the mechanism is not the same. It wouldn't make a lot of sense biologically, physiologically speaking, that whatever damage the vaccines would cause or have caused somebody is like completely unique and different from how the virus, how COVID works, right? I think that's a pretty safe angle. Now, I'm not a virologist and I'm not an immunologist, and again, this is conjecture on my part. But again, I'm usually got pretty good instincts on this. But hypothesis number one, like I say, is that I think the mechanism is likely the same. So, what is that mechanism? Well, what I've been saying for a long time now, since this started in papers that I keep turning up, is that the damage caused by COVID is due to a reactive oxygen species, a large influx of what they call reactive oxygen species, leading to severe oxidative stress, which goes on to create the hyperimmune response, which I think people are mostly, when the damage is caused by COVID, as far as, hospitalizations and death and so forth, it is due to the hyperimmune response. Nobody debates that. But a serious missed opportunity of treatment and so forth is, for some reason that's not taking place, is addressing this reactive oxygen species. And there's a lot of papers on that. When I first started talking about it, there were a few papers, and I will link the article, so I don't have to go into the whole process of the pathway. I will link the article, and I'll link a video below this so that I can save some time here. But my hypothesis is that the mechanism of whatever damage might be caused by those vaccines is the same, which is going to be severe oxidative stress caused by reactive oxygen species. Now, I'd like to give myself credit and say, I figured this all out on my own because I'm so smart. But I noticed that one of the early papers that came out in Nature that the Chinese had published basically outlined and said that that's what was going on, that they found their a large release of iron, free iron. Free iron is extremely oxidative. Usually it's bound up in proteins. And what their paper said was that there was a large release of iron, which caused reactive oxygen species, and down the negative pathways you went. And so that tipped me off, and I started looking into it. And now that we've got a year plus into this, there's a bunch of papers that support this. And those are all sourced, not even all of them, but a number of them are sourced in the article. And I consider this a major missed opportunity of treatment and addressing that. If it's not the key aspect to serious complications and so forth from COVID, it is certainly a key. So I think this. I don't think it's unreasonable to make the leap that the whatever damage to certain group of people those vaccines cause, blood, maybe it's a blood clot or what have you, it's the same mechanism. And so for those people, would it not again make sense to let's say you're going to get the vaccine, you're nervous, and you want to make sure that you have you're as resistant to any problems as you could be, then it would make sense, again, in my view, to have your glutathione levels maxed out, your antioxidant defenses maxed out, having something like lactoferrin, which sequesters free iron, and so forth, in line, just as it should, in my view, be being used with anybody, any COVID patient in the hospital. So that's conjecture number one. And number two is that I also tend to think, because of that those people that have serious, whatever that may be, very small or more than, is being reported, whatever people's position is, those people that have problems with the vaccine are probably people who would have serious issues with COVID. Again, I don't think that's a big leap. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that somebody, would have a terrible reaction to a vaccine and would have a minimal response to actually getting exposed to COVID. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me from a physiological, biological perspective. But again, it doesn't mean it's accurate. But I've got pretty good instincts for this type of thing, and those are my two. So in a sense, from a risk to benefit, it's probably still a plus to have gotten the vaccine, because that same person would have had an even worse time with COVID. Again, but that is conjecture on my part. Now, I've been looking for papers to connect those dots as far as looking specifically at looking for things like oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species, and so forth, specific to vaccines. And I haven't been able to find any papers that are, really connect that dot. And if anybody out there listening, any research or whatever, has any papers, knows of any papers, wants to share them, by all means, let me know. There's a ton of papers at this point connecting the dots, as I said, specific to how it applies to COVID and how COVID creates, so much havoc with various organs and so forth. So if that conjecture, that hypothesis on my part is correct, I think the way to one way at least to address it, either one is similar. So I think that's my two major hypotheses on what's going on here. And I'm just sort of, I was hoping by now, a year plus into this, that what I see as the main driver of the damage, that probably could be at least mitigated quite a bit, if not avoided, is still not being picked up on. And I'm getting a little frustrated about that. So that's what I think personally is going on with whatever side effects take place from the vaccines, as a parallel to how the virus itself creates so much havoc. So if that makes sense, let me know. Like I said, I'm happy to open this one up, and I just want to be very clear that the entire point of this is to forward a hypothesis and maybe fill in the blanks. And if it's not correct, that's fine. But that's how we make some progress, is to open this up and have an honest discussion of it. I also believe that some of the other medications that are being used such as steroids and perhaps, ivermectin, what have you. They address some of those issues, but they're still addressing it one step too late. It doesn't address the oxidative stress. It doesn't address the reactive oxygen species. It addresses it's going more at the inflammatory aspect phase, but that's one step later than you need to be. You should be dealing with it one step earlier. Just makes sense to me. So that's my thought on the vaccines in parallel to COVID itself, and how I think the underlying mechanisms of whatever damage or side effects some people may have are connected. So that's all I got to say on that one. I'll keep it short, and there will be some links below this to for you guys to fill in the gaps if you had questions and want papers and sources and stuff. See you all in the Brink Zone.